Hello, everybody, and welcome to the June 2024 Klamath Film member meeting. These events are open to the public, and we appreciate everyone who has joined. Normally, these meetings are on the third Thursdays of every month from 6 to 8. We're doing it on the second Thursday because, well, everyone in Klamath knows the third Thursday events downtown are kind of a big deal. We don't want to interfere with that. So thank you to those who read the fine print and recognized we were doing this meeting on the second and not the third. We do have some announcements to go through, and we'll do introductions, of course. And our guest tonight is film producer Marc Kinderman. Marc is co-owner of Orange Lion Productions, based out on the East Coast. He specializes in sports documentaries. So he's done a lot of work with ESPN, Big Ten Network. If you're familiar with things like the ESPN 30 for 30 films, he's worked on some of those. I met him about 2 months ago. He was here in Eugene, filming at Hayward Field, working on a special that is going to be showing on the Big Ten Network about the Oregon track and field Triple Crown that happened in 2016-17 when University of Oregon won cross country, indoor, and outdoor national championships all in the same season. So we're going to be talking a bit about sports tonight. However, you don't have to be a sports fan to appreciate sports documentaries because ultimately it's still filmmaking, it's still movie making. But we're going to get a sense of kind of what he does in terms of traveling all over the country, lining up interviews with athletes, and the producer side of film production tonight. So with that, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here so much, especially Karen, who's nursing a broken elbow and yet still joined our meeting. Appreciate that very much. And thank you to those of you who are at Growler Guys. Marc will be joining us around 6:30. Do have a couple of things that I wanted to run through just as far as announcements, and there's also a couple of cast and crew calls happening right now. However, first want to open this up because ultimately these meetings are a networking opportunity. If anyone is currently, hey, Anthony showed up, great. If there's anything that people are currently working on or have upcoming or are interested in being involved in something, this is an open forum. So if anyone has something that they want to bring up, by all means, grab a microphone and join in.
Did Logan talk with you at all, Kurt, about the extra work?
Extra work from Ray's project or from the Bruce Campbell film?
From Bruce Campbell.
No, he has not. But I'm certainly all ears and open to that because you mentioned a name like Bruce Campbell and everyone perks up.
So just to specify a little bit for anyone who hasn't heard for the first time, our executive director, Logan Baldwin, he's currently working in Ashland as a production assistant on a project that is being directed by Bruce Campbell. And as part of that, of course, a lot of other different avenues of local involvement. And specifically, he let me know today, and I also want to announce that they are currently, the film production itself is currently in need of some extras for certain dates over the course of June. Starting from next week and then having some scenes at the end of the month. There are, let me look, about four different opportunities where on June 19th, they need 8 extras between late 20s, early 40s, preferably dancing experience. And then June 20th, 6 extras with no specific requirements. June 21 for 10 extras, 40 in their 40s to 50s for a funeral scene. And then June 29th, 1 extra who can juggle, possibly willing to be in a clown costume. So
Okay.
whole array. And I know that we can get to work on also posting this on our email list and newsletter so that
Yes.
opportunity is available like in written form as well, because I know me just rattling all that off, it's a little bit hard to remember all of those details, but it is essentially full days where at least for the 19th and the 20th, that it'll have free breakfast and lunch, but breakfast starting at their base camp in Ashland at 7 a.m. And then we'll be bused to, everyone will be bused to the film location around 8. And then it's supposed to be maximum 12 hours. But, and then let me look at the payment, and it's projected, so not confirmed, but I believe it's $100 a day.
And just to make it absolutely clear, this is a feature film written, directed, and starring Bruce Campbell that is shooting in Ashland. So if you're not based in the Ashland Medford area, you would need to travel down there. But it is a cool opportunity to be a part of a major feature film for anyone who's interested.
So just wanted to put that out there, make sure that people knew or that they could heard it here first, but also we'll get it out on our all other different social medias or our newsletters so that members are aware.
Great.
And I wanted to let you guys know there is a clown in the group. Roland Stapper actually brought him down here to lead act and
Yep.
the seat driver. He's actually a clown trainer, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, Brian Sutherland. He's based in Portland.
Okay. Yes,
However, Brian is currently in New Orleans for the next month shooting pilots and initial episodes for a new TV series.
I see. So busy.
I know
Yeah,
someone.
so he's probably not available, but I will at least relay that to Brian and let him know. I also think Brian, I'm not sure if this production is a SAG-AFTRA or not. I believe it is, but the extras don't have to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure what specifically.
Yeah. Anybody else have something that they want to share going on? But if you want to be in a feature film, that's a cool opportunity, though it is based in Ashland.
No, nothing else.
Flying, for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm probably gonna be jumping in too.
That'd be a blessing.
I do know someone who probably would be a good fit for the potential clown role, but
Even standing off to the side, just witnessing the set would be a blessing, you know?
mhm.
Okay, great.
This education.
Anybody else have projects they're working on or pending projects, upcoming things where they need help with or are just maybe even in concept phase?
Yeah, so this week, I'll be meeting with the editor for my film that I'm creating. And I would like to ask, what would be some of the best questions to bring up between myself and the editor? If we could answer that at the end or whichever.
Okay, so in terms of editing, the best advice that I ever got when you're working on a major project is that if you're working with a separate editor, you cannot micromanage. You have to let them do their job. And also being an editor who's had people hanging over my shoulder, it's not a lot of fun. And there is a phrase called kill your babies. And that is that there may be a sequence that you shot or a scene that may be very personal to you, very important to you personally. However, is it absolutely vital in the context of the story?
I see.
And if so, you may have to kill that baby.
So
Even if it's not vital to the story arc and the film is better without that, even though you may be personally invested. Like I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we had a filmmaker based out of Portland who was in our film festival. And she did a feature film about her father who had recently passed away from cancer. And I knew her dad. I knew her dad for many years, actually. He was a famous musician based out of Portland. And so she was making this film about all the musicians that he worked with and interacted with and touring around and his life story and all that. Oh yeah, thank you, David. Kill your darlings, kill your babies. It's kind of interchangeable, man. But same vibe. So killing your darlings. She talked about how she was just an absolute blubbering mess in the editing room all the time because this is film about her dad who died, right? But at the same time, she has to recognize and take a step away and realize this thing that's super personal because it's something that I did with my dad may not be vitally important to the overall context of the story.
I see.
And so she had to kill some darlings that she wanted in because, it's personal to her, but does it actually tell her father's story?
I see. I'm telling it that way.
Anyone else have suggestions as Anthony prepares to edit a film project?
Say generally is that when it comes to the process, definitely like Kurt said, of be ready to kill your darlings.
Or babies.
When it comes to also letting the editor work, it kind of comes down to the fact that, with filmmaking being such a collaborative process of any kind of filmmaker is an artist in their own way. and editors are no different. And it kind of comes down to, if you're asking an artist to do some sort of art for you, you don't want to just be hyper nitty gritty, like hanging over them. So let them take their first crack at it. And then if there's any adjustments or changes that you want to make from there, start from there, but don't just hover over them on every single step of the way.
Yeah, because I appreciate that. I've actually only had experience in owning contracting and mechanic shop. So I had to always be over those employees and make sure everything is correct. So I appreciate you letting me know that, because I am a micromanager at heart. So that's a blessing to know that moving forward.
Let the artisan do their work.
It is one of the hardest things to do, but it's also one of the most important things as a manager, is to trust the people that you're working with to do their job.
I would look through their portfolio and see what kind of style they edit in, because every artist kind of has their own signature style, whether you think you do or not, there's signatures in there. And then lots of communication up front about what you want the project to be, what the story flow needs to be, so that you guys are on the same page and you're not getting something that's completely out of the blue when you go and look at that first cut.
That's a good one. And what about, I hate to ask one more question, and I know this could be very wide range, but for feature film independent, about what price range should I be looking into offering? And I know that's a whack question to ask, but
The great question is how much should I get paid? And there sadly is no standard template. There is no standard rate in the industry, because every project's budget is unique. And so it's really dictated based on the budget that you're working with. And some people will simply say, that's not within my price range, I can't work with you. And that's okay. You know, if it's a project that's being done, I mean, more films are made as passion projects than they are paid projects.
I see.
You know, far more passion projects are done where people get paid with food, you know, as opposed to an actual paycheck. That's just the reality of filmmaking. But as we get into more professional productions and things like our guest, who's actually already joined us early. Hello, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Let me get video going here.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I exist. There you go.
Hey, Mark. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
We're kind of going through with our meetings. We usually start off with a bit of networking and just kind of talking about projects, and then around a little bit here, we'll go through introductions and then get into kind of your career and a sense of all that you've done. So if you just kind of want to hang out for a few minutes,
Yeah, sure.
cool, I appreciate you being here.
No problem.
So we're actually talking, and you might actually have some insight for this. Anthony, the guy with the sunglasses over there, is working on his first feature film, and he is trying to work with an editor and is trying to figure out what is an appropriate amount to charge. And I tell him there is no standard rate card. It depends on the budget of the overall project and whether people will be willing to work on it. But maybe you have some insight on that as well.
When you say you're working on your first feature film, you are funding this?
Yes, and I'm looking for the price of like what to offer the editor.
I mean, you can ask them. I'd start out just ask them what they normally charge for something like this. If it's someone who has, you know, experience in it, and see if you can make that work within your budget before you come back with, you know, another offer. You know, it's different in New York than it may be for you here. And, you know, there's people who work out of facilities. There's people who work out of their, you know, I work with a lot of editors who work out of their apartments or houses or anything like that these days. So the numbers are really different for everyone in that sense. It's more what can you afford to do it? You know, factor in their number, and if you can't, come back to them with another number.
I see.
You got to figure out how many hours you think this is going to take. You know, if they're charging per hour, if they're giving you a rate for an entire project. I mean, a lot of the people I work with are by the hour.
That can get taxi over time because
it can. You know, the people I've been working with are doing it for a while, and you kind of have the faith that, that they're not going to slow play it, or, that they have other projects that they're looking to finish this. It's not, none of the projects I'm doing currently are, shouldn't be expounded where you're paying double or triple what you intended in a budget. I've had that happen once in the project I'm in, and didn't use that person again, and that was a learning experience. But normally that doesn't happen.
Learning experiences to lose.
Yeah, I had to fire him, because he just wasn't getting the show done.
Yes.
And we have delivery dates and due dates. You may not, and for a feature film, it's a little different. There's, you're not necessarily, do you have it where it's going to a festival or anything, or is there a date you're aiming for here?
I would like to be part of the Klamath Film next season. I won't make it this season. It's filming in November, so
Okay,
I had to wait on the weather.
sure.
So June
So all of
1st
this, how many
oh,
days are you filming?
It'll be a 14-day, and the first 3 days are the main group of actors, and then after that it breaks down to just one actor.
Okay. Okay.
So
14.
June 1st,
Ye-
2025 would be the deadline date to at least have a rough cut ready, Anthony.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the person to at least be ready by spring with the editing. That way there was time to look it over. Critique things.
I work more in the nonfiction world. I've been doing we'll do my bio, when,
Mhm.
a little later on here, but it's a little different, but I mean, it's still, there's still a path of, somebody's looking at it and there's changes, and, you try and, get it done in as few waves of edit as you can, a few rounds of edit as you can. But, for feature film, is it entirely your vision, or is it?
It's actually inspired by a true story, not based on a true story.
Okay.
And so it's about a homeless girl who actually creates, or I was going to say woman, who creates a clothing line that becomes successful throughout a local boutique that allows her in.
Awesome.
So the main point of the film is to show the struggle of homelessness and character throughout it, human character.
Okay. Well, absolutely. Good luck to you.
I'm glad to hear that project is back online, because we did have one or two people reach out to us, Anthony, and ask if that was still a thing that may have been attached to it, or you'd had conversations with them at one time or another. And I was like, you got to talk to Anthony. I have no idea where his project stands.
Yeah, I did take a step back. I went through some medical things, but I'm back in the game.
Okay. Have you dealt with any film editors before? Is this your first experience with this?
This is my first experience. During school, I edited myself, but I would not call that much experience.
Yeah, I mean, I edited myself a ways, but I could, Avid, I could JKL my way around a keyboard and probably still get a rough cut out under gunpoint, but you wouldn't want me coloring anything, or
Yeah.
if you enjoy levels or, those kind of things. But
I'm one of those who would like to do everything myself, but I see the value in splitting the things and not putting myself too thin.
it's hard. It is, mentally and emotionally, as much as, fiscally. I would say talk to, as many editors as you're comfortable talking with, and see if you get a vibe going, and if you can make the numbers work.
Yeah,
That-
because
Yep.
Kurt was saying deleting certain scenes inspired by a true story would be difficult to let go of, so I have to be prepared.
Yeah, it's certainly a back and forth when an editor, and if you're not, is used to that, they're coming in with their own vision once they've started laying out things as well. So, but it's your money.
For sure.
It's one of those things where it comes down to, producing and directing is also essentially just being a good manager. And it doesn't matter if you're filmmaking or running a factory or a restaurant. It comes down to hiring good people, making sure that they have the tools they need, and then trusting them to do their job without hovering over their shoulder every single second of the day.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you just have to have trust that you have someone good who's working on your project who shares the vision for it that you do. And certainly you can have input, but you don't want to be micromanaging every single second. It can drive people crazy.
That makes.
Anyone else have advice for Anthony's film project before we move on? I have a couple quick announcements, then we'll get to our guest, who I appreciate, Mark, you being here early and already chiming in on some stuff. That's great.
Just that you need to expect it to take much longer than your initial estimate's going to be.
Especially for being your first project. Yes.
With everyone here, I already pre-jumped, and this is my second attempt.
Right.
I made a shoot for it back in March, and that did not work out well.
Anyone else have any projects they want to mention or things going on? I know we also have a few people from Eugene, including myself, on this call too. You're certainly welcome to chime in if you have a cool project upcoming or something that maybe you're looking for, or any advice that you may be looking for. These meetings are very informal, very casual. You know, grab a drink, get some alcohol in your system, some snacks, kick back, and let's talk about movies.
I'm an actor here in Lane County. My name is Zar Elke. I think the biggest thing that's happened is I've had quite a few auditions recently, so that's been a really big positive of my life. Obviously had some emails of, hey, we're gonna go with someone else, but it's still a really good step in the right direction. So that's just something big that's happened in 2024 for me, is a lot of auditions and getting the chance to be seen here in the Pacific Northwest.
I can vouch for Zar. He's an amazing actor, and yeah, Zar. I think it's good that you're. I know it sounds weird, but I think it's good that you're getting some rejections. Man, film is all like it's a lot of rejection, right? Rejection from film festivals, rejection from projects, rejection from trying to get funding, stuff like that. And you just got to push through, because you never know when that one just comes through and you're like, yep, this is the one that's going to keep me going for the next leg of my career. So keep going.
In the industry, you have to have a certain level of thick skin, because you're going to get rejected left and right, and it can be for the dumbest, most mundane reasons. When I was working in Hollywood for many years, I saw so many actors and people in the industry that were getting really dejected from being rejected time and time and time again, and feel like they're getting nowhere, barely scraping by. And then that one right place, right time happens, and suddenly they're the next big, great thing, right? So like some good friends of mine, and one of them we've actually had on a guest on this previously, is now a big time screenwriter in LA. He's written all the Sonic the Hedgehog films. He's had a bunch of other major feature films come out. Pat and Josh are screenwriters. I worked with Pat at a video game company years ago, where we were barely making minimum wage. And now all of a sudden he's like the next big thing screenwriter in LA, and everyone wants a piece of him. And he's like, I've been here for 30 years. Where were you in the 2000s when I had all these script ideas and I couldn't even get my foot in the door, right? So it takes a certain level of patience, tolerance, understanding of, I constantly have to work to get better, or asking good questions, not like getting upset, but what could I possibly have done to have been better, or what are you looking for that I don't currently have? And just keep working on your craft, and hopefully that right place, right time comes along for you.
It's been good getting the rejections, though. I mean, it's definitely taught me, and it's just a good sign, I think, to be even asked to come into the door, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, if I'm able to add anything at all. Hi, Zar. My name's Bowen. I'm another actor. Hello. Nice to meet a fellow actor. My thought with it as well, and especially when I first started acting or getting into performance, that's absolutely one of like the big things that I was told that everyone suggested that I become accustomed to quickly. That's one of the things I wanted to hammer home as much as possible as I got into it. It's kind of an interesting thing, the relationship that a performer or an actor has to have with, I guess, their ego, in that you need it to a certain extent so that you can, perform, get into character, and, make confident decisions in how you want an interpretation to be made, but you also at certain points need to just throw it away entirely, because when it comes to auditions, people are going to, reject us for any number of different reasons, and 99.9% of them are going to have nothing directly to do with you, or for things that are absolutely unchangeable. And it's to that extent that I think it comes down to mentality wise. I don't even know if I would be so bold as to say that failure should be celebrated, not because it was a failure, but to fail means you attempted, and it's better to attempt than not. So not to quote Wayne Gretzky's quoting Michael Scott, but something shots you don't take.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always felt we learn far more from failure than we ever do from success too. And from an early age, right? Like, oh, don't touch that. It hurts. I just learned that lesson. If I hadn't hurt myself, I maybe wouldn't think of that, right? Just as you progress through life, we're constantly learning through all of our failures. So I always tell people, fail spectacularly and fail publicly, because you're going to learn so many valuable lessons from that moving forward.
I fail all the time. Okay.
I like how Zara said like 2 words, and then we all just started dogpiling him, calling him a
Sorry.
failure, and that he should be rejected.
The first 2 things I learned in this industry, because I'm also a newbie, was no one will have faith in you. They think you're crazy for creating these characters in your head, and don't expect no one to motivate you but yourself. So I'm sorry if that's too legit, but that's what I've experienced so far.
If no one else has any, or does anyone else have anything else?
There was-
I have a couple quick announcements, then we'll get to our guests tonight.
Okay, I'll let you go through, Kurt.
Okay. So first off, I'll give anyone else want to chime in with something before we get rolling on our content? Having heard none, okay, moving on real quick. First up is the fact that we are now closed for submissions for the Klamath Independent Film Festival. This is going to be our 12th year of the film festival. And we've already gone through our first run of submission reviews and cut out the lowest tiered ones. And now it gets really difficult because we still have about 60 to 65 films in the running that we need to trim down to about 30 to 35 that will actually make the film festival. And it is painful. You want to talk about kill your darlings. For those who are just joining us for the first time, we are the organizers of the Klamath Independent Film Festival as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It is the only film festival around that exclusively shows made in Oregon films. So we get films from all over the state, including a few of you on this call have been involved in some films that we got. And so we have our second tier of judges currently reviewing everything. And we will meet in mid-July to have about a 6 to 7 hour long Zoom call to discuss every single remaining film and try to shoehorn as much as we possibly can into a 3-day film festival. So again, like what we were saying to Zaro, don't take it personal if your film gets cut, because every year there's things like, oh man, I love that film, but it just doesn't quite fit. So maybe it can run next year. But thank you to everyone who was involved in films that were submitted. And as always, the window will open up February next year for the 13th annual Klamath Independent Film Festival.
I actually have a question about the film festival here.
Yes.
Is it required that is the release of the film to enter? Or?
No, so the way that it works is if you have at least a rough cut ready by the deadline of June 1st, we will accept the rough cut as long as the finished project can be done by early September. Because the film festival this year will be September 27th through the 29th at the Ross Raglan in Klamath Falls.
Thank you.
Cool. We have a couple of cast and crew calls that are going on right now, in addition to the Bruce Campbell feature film that is shooting in Ashland right now that is seeking extras. We have a production film crew based out of Reno that is coming to Klamath in about a week, June 20th and 21st. They're doing some outdoors lifestyle commercial shoots, picnic areas, mountain biking, fly fishing. I believe they may need a couple of extras. As soon as I know, I will relay that information along. So June 20th and 21st, we're going to have an out-of-town production crew in town. Additionally, there is a SAG-AFTRA union low-budget feature film that's going to be shooting in the Medford area in July, primarily at the Rogue Valley Mall. They have filled about half their cast out, so they are looking for local actors to potentially work on this film. However, it is SAG-AFTRA, so if you're not a SAG member, You know, they might be able to squeeze you in as an extra, but probably not in a speaking role. They're also desperate to find a local experienced grip and gaffer. So if anyone knows anyone, I think Paul Harris might be back in town now. I know he was living in Eugene for a while. So that's the first person I can think of. But if anyone else knows experienced grips or gaffers, they're desperate to find someone who's willing to work in Medford in July. So Ray Robeson, who's a longtime friend of the film festival and Klamath Film, is a producer on the project. So his emails is up on the screen there. If you're interested in working on that project, please contact Ray or contact me, and I can get you in touch with Ray to talk about it. So if anyone's interested in doing some acting over in Medford or Ashland, we have feature films that are either about to shoot or coming up very soon. And then lastly, Oregon Humanities, a statewide grant program, is currently looking for a freelance video producer to do a series of interview videos. And this is going to run through end of October. They're paying $3,000 for you to do essentially 1-minute short clip videos of recipients of grants around the state. And so doing short little highlight videos, these can be done over Zoom, but ideally this would be traveling around the state and interviewing people in person. So if you're able to do so, or if you're interested, Oregon Humanities, and I will drop in the link right now into the chat. But I think that's Jared off to the side there. This may be something for you that you might be interested in. I'm probably going to submit for it as well. But the link is there for Oregon Humanities doing contract film production, one-on-one interviews, if anyone's interested. With that, we have a guest tonight, as we do every month. His name is Marc Kinderman. He is a producer. There's his IMDb in very small print of some of the projects he's worked on. You probably can't see it. But Marc is a longtime producer and co-owner of a company called Orange Lion Productions, who specializes in sports documentaries. So you don't have to be a sports fan to appreciate sports documentaries. It's still filmmaking at the end of the day, but certainly it helps if you enjoy sports as well. So we're going to get a chance to know him. But first, Marc, we want you to get a chance to know us. So very quickly, we're going to go around the room and just introduce ourselves so you get a sense of who we are and where we're coming from so that you know how the conversation is going to go. Okay. So first off, hi, everyone. I'm Kurt Lidke. I'm the board chair and former executive director of Klamath Film. I recently moved to Eugene after being based in Klamath Falls for about a decade. I'm a filmmaker, a photographer, and a commercial drone pilot. And recently I started a new job as the marketing director for a historic all ages concert venue here in Eugene. And I worked in Hollywood for about 12 years previously in a number of different roles. Karen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks. I'm Karen Caverly Molyneux. I live in Klamath Falls, Oregon. I am currently a history PhD student. My studies and dissertation focus on silent film, the silent film industry and silent film era. And yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Wonderful. David? David may, oh, no, he's there.
Hi, everyone. My name is David DiRienzo. I am the sitting board president of CTV of Lane County, a small public access studio. Well, small now, but it's getting bigger. And I went to UCF Film. I've worked on some big productions in the Orlando and Atlanta area. I created training videos for Apple for about 7 years. And moved out to Eugene for another job opportunity, and started getting involved in the local film community and met Kurt. And now I'm just trying to meet as many people in the film industry as I can.
Well, thank you so much for joining. And Zara, we already talked to you a little bit, but why don't you give us a little bit more detail about yourself?
Hi, my name is Zar. I'm an actor here in Lane County in the Pacific Northwest. I've been acting since I was 10 years old. I've mostly been doing film as well as theater. I'm here in this group just to meet other creatives and learn as much as I possibly can. Yeah, just I love acting. I love film. I love everything that has to do with it, editing and everything. I mean, it's my favorite thing in the world.
And should note that I ran into both, and sorry for messing up your name, Zaro. I'm sure I'm not the first one that screwed that up.
You're good.
So I ran into Zaro and David last night. David hosted a screening of the Sam Rockwell sci-fi film Moon at the studio that we all hung out at, which is one of my favorite Sam Rockwell films, and Sam is one of my all-time favorite actors. So it was fun to go back and revisit that film. I invited them out to join our meeting. Let's go around the table and get to know everyone who is in person at Growler Guys.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Bowen Browder. I am an actor performer based in Klamath Falls, Oregon. I've Klamath Falls native. I've been here my whole life, and I've been involved in Klamath Film or with Klamath Film in various capacities since about like 2019, 2020, about that. Yeah, around that point. But now I'm part of the board as the vice chair, but just love storytelling, love filmmaking of all kinds, really enjoy the process. Of course, by being an actor, I tend to go more in towards like the fictional, the narrative things, but there's just so much about the filmmaking process that I've learned over the years that just makes all of it as a medium so fascinating and endlessly fulfilling to me. So I always like to be here, always like to talk and listen to different people, but it's always really fun to see different perspectives and, you know, see how it can be used to better my own skills as a filmmaker and performer, and just see how I can contribute to the conversation.
Cool. And thank you, Bowen, for covering while Logan is working as a PA on Bruce Campbell's film.
Oh yeah, all good.
Because normally our executive director, Logan, would be the one managing this over at Growler Guys, but he's on set.
At this point, it's fun. I kind of enjoy it. All the power in my hands. Okay.
Yeah. Anthony or Jared?
You can go first.
My name is Jared Hurd. I own 40 Deuce Films here in Klamath Falls. I'm primarily a commercial filmmaker, but I do some documentary work, some narrative work, a little bit of everything.
Thank you for being here. And our two guests in the back there, I'm sorry, it's a small enough picture. I can't tell who is it, who's back there.
It's me, Orion.
Are you an actor or filmmaker, or just a film fan?
Orion. It's Orion.
Oh, hello, hi.
I'm your new accountant.
Yes, hi. Orion just was appointed to our board of directors. So thank you so much for coming down in person. Make sure to get some food and a drink and absorb. Also, she does have some film background because of your mom. You want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So I was born in Japan. My mother was on TV as a comedian for the majority of my life. I've been on stage mostly. I started at 3 in a production of Annie, and I was part of the Tokyo Ballet Company for multiple years until I moved to the States. So that's my, I guess, acting stuff. I've done some community theater in Portland, but that kind of my pursuits went towards more, I don't know, employable avenues. So now I'm an accountant. And so I wanted to join the to get some experience with nonprofit accounting. The plan is to teach eventually. So getting as much experience with different forms of accounting. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining. We appreciate you joining the board, and we will definitely put your accounting skills to use in the very, very near future. Although I know you're probably still going through finals at Oregon Tech right now, so.
I just finished today. So.
Okay, well, in that case, make sure you got plenty of alcohol. So, and Anthony, although it's Bowen, did someone else sit down at the table? It looked like you were waving at somebody.
Trish arrived.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
I guess we'll let Anthony go, and then we can go to Trish.
That must have been a life to have a comedian as a mother.
Stare into the void.
Wow.
My name's Anthony. Lee Thornton. I am a local here in Klamath Falls, and I recently began to explore the film industry, and I appreciate the education that I received here. Most of my previous experience is theater. I was Oberon in Midnight Singer's Dream, I believe it's called, Shakespeare. And that was a lot of tongue twisting lines to remember on that one.
And Anthony also got to work as a PA on a feature film that shot in Klamath Falls last October, wasn't it?
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's all, how much labor is involved.
Yep. So that's a feature film called Backseat Driver, which we haven't seen the final cut yet. It did not get finished in time for this year's film festival, so it'll probably be in next year.
Awesome.
And Trish, you're off camera, but if you just want to quickly introduce yourself.
I'm Trish Seiler, and I have been working with the Klamath Film Group on a strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years, which will help focus all of their passion and their energy and resources to bring them to the next level and beyond. My hope is that by the time we're done with this process, they'll have a clear idea of the direction they need to go and the resources to do it. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. It's going to be good.
And thank you, Trish, so much for being here and all of your hard work with us. We greatly appreciate it. So Mark, that is us. We're filmmakers, we're actors, we're film fans based in Oregon. And so that everyone on this call knows, I met Mark, maybe a month, maybe two months ago. He came through Eugene filming at Hayward Field for an upcoming special documentary that's going to be on the Big Ten Network. And so got a chance to help him out a little bit on that and look forward to the project that he's working on. So thank you for your patience, Mark, in sitting tight while we went through that. But now that you know us, let's get to know you. So a little bit on your background, how you got into film and what you do now.
Sure. So I came out of Syracuse University in 1993 with a broadcast journalism degree. And, I thought I was going to be a sportscaster, so I applied around to, 750 million different towns. And I ended up working radio in Colorado Springs. My parents had just moved out there. And I ended up throwing an application to ESPN as a production assistant. They had a program that, is a little more widely known now, but, essentially then was come to the middle of Connecticut, and for $7.50 an hour in 1993, you too can watch the Vancouver Canucks at 11 p.m. in Eastern time when, for the 2 a.m. Sports Center. So that's how I got my, start in the business doing that, and kind of worked my way up, cutting in-house, features and whatnot for ESPN. And I didn't get into doc work until they started what was called the Sports Century Project. In 1997 is when the project started ramping up, where it was a full recap of, the 20th century in sports. We did a 50 greatest athlete countdown. There were 50 half hours. I worked on 9 of them. There were decade shows, sports in the 40s, 50s, so on, and other specials. There were probably, 50, 60 hours of programming that went into that all aired in 1999. And I came out of that, and they said ESPN Classic is starting, where we're going to do more of that then, but we can't guarantee if you come back to Bristol that you'll work there full time. It may be a rotating thing. You could end up going back and doing the same things you were doing before you left. And I didn't want to do that. So one of my friends was in the same position I was at the end of that project, and we jumped and we went freelance. And, I'm from Syracuse. They're the Orangemen, or Orange now. And Scott, my business partner, was Penn State, Nittany Lions, and there's Orange Lion. That's our production house that we started. And we were fortunate enough off the bat to start. They gave us a few of the Sports Century shows that started running on Classic that were outside of the 50 greatest, that became our shows, our 1 hour, 60-minute shows, because we knew where all the footage and some of the stuff was that we just left, basically. And we were able to kind of tack on from that. We did stuff for A&E. I did 3 A&E biographies that were music. I did, Scott did PBS, went back to Baton, the Baton Death March, and did stuff with that. And But our main thing, has been sports. We've done a bunch for ESPN, and for the last 10 years, we've done probably, I don't know, 40 hours or so for the Big Ten Network. And with Oregon joining the conference, that is what led me out to Kurt a few months ago. And the project that's part of is called The Big Moment, which is basically a half hour around a specific play. In this case, it's Raven Rogers' 2017 run to win the Triple Crown at the end of the 4x400 relay for the Ducks. And that will air August 2nd.
Sorry, I muted myself while I was getting a snack. And it was quite humorous when Mark first reached out to me as a cold call, because I had just recently applied for a job with the Big Ten Network. And so I assumed for the first 5 minutes of conversation that he was like implying that he was a callback for the potential video production job.
Nope.
Instead, he had called me because I randomly shot some footage of a halftime thing at the Pac-12 basketball tournament in like 2002 in LA with a little pocket phone, and he needed that footage for the documentary that he's working on.
That's great.
Which is terrible footage, and I apologize profusely that it wasn't more professionally shot, but it was a little crappy little.
No, I think that may end up as part of a social hit than being in the body of the 2430 of that Washington show. That's actually the Washington version, the Big Moment, not the Oregon one. So, which I just started cutting this week. So
fantastic.
Or my editor did.
So this gentleman travels all over the country interviewing athletes and filming on site and working as a producer of all of these productions. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, because I feel like people, whether you're in the industry or just kind of outside looking in, people have a good idea of what an actor does, what a director does, even what some of the crew does. What a producer does is a little bit more vague to the public. Can you kind of describe kind of all that goes into what you do?
Chief cook and bottle washer, I guess, is the way it goes. Right. I don't edit, I don't shoot. I could do both of those things, worse than the shooters and editors that I hire. But essentially networks come to me, sometimes we pitch our own, it goes both ways, but with ESPN and BTN, they'll come to us with an idea, or we'll pitch a series and the ideas will go back and forth, and we'll come together with a budget. And, eventually that budget clears all the hurdles, and all right, here's your money, go make something. So, I decide who to interview and who shoots it, and what goes into the show, and what picture, what, B-roll and whatnot I give my editor. And the editor makes it pretty, but I'm the one who's kind of giving him the story to do it with. And you work through that process and make sure all the paperwork is done on the other end, the cue sheets and the releases and the, all the licensing, and there you have a show.
And it does have you flying all over the country and hiring regional film crews to come and meet in set locations, like in Eugene a little while ago. But I'm sure that comes with its complications. We were laughing because I remember when we were talking before, you were trying to track down a former Washington athlete who's been in the NBA for some time and then out of the NBA. And just as you were trying to line up an interview, he got signed back to a contract in the NBA. So you're having to basically like chase him around the country, right? How often does that
happen? I thought his interview was at first, Isaiah Thomas played for University of Washington, about 15 years or so ago now. And he's based in, Tacoma. He's from Tacoma and, based up that way, works out at University of Washington. And I thought I was going to get him up there. And then he ended up going to a minor league team in Utah, in Salt Lake. So I thought it was going to happen there. Then he said, no, it may not happen there, but maybe we'll do it when we're on the road in Grand Rapids. And then it didn't happen there because he signed with the Phoenix Suns. And so I emailed the Sons and told them my tale of woe, and eventually we figured it out, and I got him in Phoenix. So we all lived happily ever after in that way.
So that's a good example, though, of kind of what a producer does, in that you plan, you set schedules, you determine budgets, and then you problem solve when everything goes wrong on set or all of those schedules get thrown out of whack.
And problem solving is probably the number one thing I do. That doesn't, it's not an official role. There's no title in the credits that goes problem solver. Probably should be, but
Putting out all the fires.
there is that. Yeah.
I just reminds me of watching that series that's like the making of The Godfather, and it's all about the life of the producer. Did you guys see that one yet? Yeah. What's the name of that one? Anyway, yeah, if we can remember the name of it, I'll let them know. But it's a nice idea because it really kind of shows how hard and difficult it was to make the Godfather movie and the sequel and everything. I mean, I don't know how accurate it is, but I mean, I can only imagine that gives you the real flavor of what it was like. So kudos to you for doing all that stuff. It's not easy work.
I'd love to know how well they did with their budget on that. I mean, they made it back, obviously, several times over, but I wonder what they went in with.
Well, yeah, I remember like one time they made deals with the lighting and all, that other stuff. They give you, it's called the offer. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so, yeah, they sometimes had to make deals because they were kind of on a pretty tight budget. So they were doing some nutty things to make it all work. And even like, I guess there's that idea that you can make deals with the people furnishing the equipment where you're like, give us a discount now. But then later if we make another one, then we'll use you again, kind of thing. So it was interesting deals like that.
Yeah, I know Spike Lee's got some great stories from She's Gotta Have It, and his early days stuff of making that work. So
well, one thing that's very true about filmmaking, and those of us on the call who have been on set or been in Hollywood or been involved with productions, is that oftentimes the behind the scenes story is actually more interesting than the actual film in terms of how the hell did they pull this off to actually get it done. And that goes back all the way to the early silent era, like you and I, Karen, have talked about previously, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again soon, of just showing up in a spot and trying to film before the police show up and escaping out, out the door, like they did so often in the silent film era, up to present day. This stuff still happens, like what Mark just talked about, having to fly to 4 different cities to try to track down one key interview he has to have for this production, and the schedule keeps changing on him. I mean, that stuff is a regular. You'd be amazed some of the weird things that happen behind the scenes in order for a film to get done. And even once a film is done, it doesn't necessarily mean a film is ever going to get released. There's still all sorts of things that have to happen behind the scenes. Oftentimes when a film is in the can, really the process is just beginning. Does anyone have any questions for Mark at this time?
I'm curious what your process is for tracking down some of the old footage, like Kurt's cell phone footage. Like, how do you track down some of those obscure pieces of media out there?
I'm just sitting there banging around YouTube with every search I can come up with. That's the main way for that stuff. But I'm talking to schools and, with these projects in particular, you're talking to, does anybody know anyone who was there with a camera, kind of thing. And, you eventually just talking to people. There's a lot of it, you just keep working your way through people and you hit something. For these last couple ones for Oregon, Washington, I found a lot of that stuff on YouTube though. And it just, not just because you find it on YouTube doesn't mean you can make contact with the people, who shot it. So I've gotten lucky, and Facebook and Twitter and, all the other socials too. Sometimes, it's a lot easier than it was when I started doing this 20 whatever years ago, to find stuff like that. There wasn't a place in 1998 where that stuff lived online. There was an online, but nothing lived there.
Yeah, how the hell would you have ever found me pre-YouTube in terms of knowing that someone randomly shot this this halftime competition that you needed for your production.
Right. But there were ways back then. You still talk to people. They found footage of Babe Ruth in an attic, like his famous called shot. I think it was somebody randomly called in and say, "Hey, do you need?" Probably, somebody should take a look at this. And
in my days when I was a newspaper reporter in Southern Oregon, the greatest thing ever happened was someone randomly came to the door and said, "We're cleaning out our grandmother's attic who had recently passed away, and we found an old photo album from the 1880s and 1890s." And it had a bunch of photos from the area that I was working in at the time. And they thought this should probably belong to the newspaper to research. And it ended up being this just treasure trove of grand history that I did multiple articles on and ended up donating it eventually to the local museum. But it just randomly walked through the door one day. Just like, oh, hey, by the way, here's this unbelievable collection of images that was, it was the guy who had founded the newspaper there in the 1880s. So one of the few people who would actually have a camera in that era and took photos of everything and all these nationwide travels and all this unbelievable stuff. It's like, where would you ever find that? It just kind of randomly came to the door one day as this unbelievable historic find. So you're right. Stuff like that can magically appear, but it does help now that Google exists.
HBO did a whole series like that in the 80s, 90s, when it was a game. It was called. Basically, it was home movie footage from old baseball games, with poetry type narration under it, and a lot of that stuff they just dug, just kept talking to people and going in attics.
I just recently finished rewatching the Ken Burns baseball series, all 9 parts, last month. So yeah, a lot of that footage, you wonder where exactly did they find this stuff from, 1910, 1920 that they're incorporating it into it. So this is a great opportunity to talk about documentary filmmaking and the process behind that. Great opportunity to talk to a TV producer. So if anyone has any questions, by all means, this is a very open forum, casual. And also, Marc, if you have any funny behind the scenes stories or good advice that you want to share, this is kind of open forum conversation. It looks like Karen has a question. She raised her hand.
Yeah, hi. Next summer, I have scheduled myself for 2 courses that run back to back, and it's on historical documentary making. So I'm really looking forward to that. I am struggling, and I know maybe it'll come to me. How do you figure out what to do a documentary on?
I don't know. What are you passionate about? A lot of what I do, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in a couple projects where, with Sports Century, you batted around some names like, how about we do something on this guy, or we want to do something on Pete Maravich. Can you interested?
That was a really good film, by the way. Good job, Marc.
Thank you. The way I got to Debbie Harry, I did an hour and 80 biography on Debbie Harry. Just kind of randomly fell into my lap because the people they had asked to do it couldn't do it, and they said, "Well, music a little bit. You try it." And I ended up doing 3 of those, but it's really, A, what are you passionate about? And B, who are you looking to pitch it to?
That's true. Because, well, right now it's just a class. It's a class.
Right.
It's a, but I mean, I have aspirations to, once it's finalized and ready to go, I would love to be able to submit it to the KIF, the Klamath Independent Film Festival, but I guess maybe I'm a year out from it, and I'm already going, what the heck am I going to do a documentary on? And my studies, like I said, my research, everything is centering around silent film era, silent film industry, and then I get to looking at my own community, and I think, well, gosh darn it, there's so much here just within this region that would be so cool to do documentaries on.
Like
So
what?
I know that that's kind of like a, I don't know, kind of maybe a question that you can't answer, but I guess maybe how do you filter out the
Well,
stuff and
wait,
get to,
I'm not from this area. What's so interesting? Start there.
okay, all right, that makes sense. And so, yeah, that's going to take some more time too. So, okay, well, and thanks for letting me ask that, because I'm already going, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do this on, because there's so much.
Well,
I think
see if you can, what are the things that grab you the most? There's so much, but you got to pick a direction at some point.
Karen, you're a writer. You know full well that the number one thing is, if you're not sure, write what you know. So
That's true.
that's
That's true.
where we always start. And the same thing is true in film, because a film starts with writing first.
Yep.
So
And
Yep. Okay.
And I also think what I've always appreciated about documentary filmmaking is, and also this kind of goes from the academic angle as well, is that whether it's like, an actual like paper thesis or like a documentary or anything that is also like informative or entertaining or whatever, it all is rooted in what's something you feel needs to be said that hasn't been said already. What's something that you want to bring attention to? What's something that you want to present to the world, or what's something specific or as specific or as broad as you want to talk about that is you feel that it's being underrepresented somehow and you want to bring more attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, even when I'm just out and about, I mean, one time I was at the ER room and some poor veteran, was just waiting there to be taken care of. Couldn't wait any longer. He had to go home and just try to fix himself. But I mean, instead of, because it was taking so long in there, so I was just like, we really should probably do a documentary on this, on what's going, is this just here in Klamath, or is this all the way around? The whole industry, that these ER rooms are just, the medical community's got all this money, and yet their ER rooms take hours when people are in need. I'm like, it's just seems a little ridiculous. And so, I mean, sometimes I think when you just walk around in life and talk to people, but you kind of do it with an eye or ear of, I'm looking for ideas, instead of just chatting, just to chat. But you're actually kind of thinking about, is there something that should be said here? And I think when you just kind of go around with that mentality, that more things start popping up. And I would just start writing them down. And like Mark said, I guess you have to narrow it down, but that's the name. I mean, there's lots of ideas. I just walk around, I can find all kinds of stuff. Just find it's the hard part.
Karen,
yeah,
sorry.
I'll say the best songs, the best stories, the best films, the best whatever is a reflection of the human experience. And so it is a reflection of maybe something you experienced, maybe something a friend experienced, or something that's just personal to you, and then build from there. That's where the write what you know phrase comes from.
Karen, how did you get involved in silent film?
Well, it's kind of weird. I got published in the Oregon Historical Quarterly for my piece that I did on uncovering the hidden history of the Chinese community in early Klamath Falls. And so it led me to the work of Marion Wong out of Oakland, California, and they had discovered her remaining silent film that she had written, produced, directed, acted in. And as a Chinese American, it never went anywhere. It didn't get distributed. And so just that concept of not only her, but silent film in general. I mean, it just, yeah, that's kind of how that evolved. And so, all of these ideas and all of these processes that you guys are feeding into my question, I thank you so much for, because it gives a lot, it makes it a lot easier for me to sit down and take a look at that now and not be so overwhelmed. So I appreciate everyone's feedback on that.
Well, I'm not sure what Mark's
Is she worth doing a film on? I mean,
What's that?
Is Marianne worth doing a film on, telling her story?
She could. They have done one on her. and out of UC Berkeley, I believe it was. And I have to go back and look, but there's been one done on her, and then her, I believe it's her grandnephew is the head of archives at UC Davis, and he's the one who discovered her film in their basement. And so she was discovered, oh gosh, I want to say maybe 10, 15 years ago, but there's not much on her. But they do have, there has been a published documentary on her already. So, but yeah, I mean, that's a great idea too. But I just, like I said, there's so much.
I'm not sure what Mark's process is. My process with documentaries is I always go in with the idea of what it's going to be. And my questions when I'm doing my interviews are kind of skewed in that direction. But once you get the interviews, you really kind of discover the story. The story is going to be in what the people have to say, at least in my experience. And that's really, you can go in with an idea, but it always changes once you hit the edit.
Absolutely right. 100%.
Well, and thank you, Jared. And hi, Jared. Nice to see you.
David or,
Thank you all.
or Zaro, do you
Thank
maybe
you.
have some thoughts on this too?
I can make outlines till I'm blue in the face, until you
Yeah.
get the interviews done, and then you start scripting, that's
Okay.
that's where it is. I
That
mean,
makes
outlines
sense.
help at least, in figuring out what questions you even want to ask and what story you want to tell. But the outline isn't the film.
Right. Thank you all so much. I appreciate everyone's input. That helps.
And with David and Zaro being actors and directors, they can probably confirm what I say often, which is that a script is never the law. A script is a guide. And if there's something that more naturally comes out or comes out in the course of things, then if that feels better for the film, then you roll with that. Some of the best lines in films have been totally ad-libbed on the spot.
Yeah, don't limit yourself to sticking to a script so much that you miss out on some great incidental performances.
Right. You may even get directors that want you to improv some scenes, correct?
Right. Yeah. Because I don't want anything to look like it's forced. You know what I mean? If sometimes I know that things evolve naturally, and I want to be open to that for sure.
When you do your interviews, approach them like a conversation and not like an interview. Try and make them forget the camera's there. That'll go a long ways towards making it feel more comfortable.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks, Jared.
I think Zaro wanted to say something as well.
Oh, just that I want to echo what David said, because I had a situation where I'd done a short film and there was an end section and I was really tired and I read it wrong. But I came up to the director and mentioned my idea about the way that I read the scene, and it saved the production money. So they were like, perfect, it was obviously low budget, but they were like, this saves us a lot of money, this idea of yours, everybody really likes it, so we're just going to go with it. And so that was like an immediate, like, quick second change. But everybody sort of was collaborating and went, that's actually a really good idea, let's go with that. So
nice. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for everyone. These are great. This is great input, and I appreciate it.
Karen, I'm actually working on a documentary about it's kind of weird. It's about me cloning my cat, and about it kind of extends to talk about like cloning and human animal relationships. Something else I can talk to you when we have our side conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have you started shooting, David, on that, or how's that going for you?
Yeah, I've done 3 interviews so far. They all got very emotional because it's mostly a story about pet loss and like grief in general. So they're very intense interviews, or they at least are incidentally turning out to be very intense interviews. So I kind of have to take a break from them for a while after I do each one. The next one should be a little bit more clinical. I'm going to be interviewing some folks at the OSU actually has one of the most prestigious veterinary schools in the country. And I'm going to be interviewing some folks down there and talking about some of this stuff.
I'm very old school. if you want a master class in interviewing, I suggest you take a look at the work of Studs Terkel out of Chicago. He was a reporter for a number of years. He published many books on different topics. One is called Working, where he just interviews people and he lets them talk. But the questions that he asks are just key. Another book of his is called Hard Times, about the Depression in the 1930s. Just an absolute gem of a listener. And when you interview, you're not there to talk, you're there to listen. And he was just a master at his craft. So if you take the time to look at some printed work, you might find some ideas.
Nice, thank you.
Any other thoughts on that, or again, this is very open forum, so this is a great time for advice as well as stories or things we've worked on. And again, Marc, thank you so much for being here and for all of your insight. Greatly appreciate it. Especially since he's on the East Coast right now. I think, although you're always traveling, so
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like I'm in bed at 10. That's not my deal anyway. But no, my son's graduating high school tomorrow, so that's
Oh, congratulations.
thanks. So heading to Johns Hopkins in the fall. So much smarter than I am. So
you've worked on a bunch of really interesting. You mentioned Sports Century films, which, you know, if you're a fan of sports documentaries, I certainly am. I'm a sports fan. Not everyone. You don't have to be a sports fan to appreciate sports documentaries. It helps, but it's still filmmaking at the end of the day. Sports Century was fantastic. I know you've worked on some of the SEC storied films as well, which are very similar. And you also got to work on some of the ESPN 30 for 30 things, or some of the shorts associated with them. Which
yeah, some I did. Well, ESPN Films. I did a 30 for 30 short on the day Reagan got shot was also the last time the Final Four had a third place game. And those two things intersected at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. So we ended up doing a 30 for 30 on that. And we did a 2 hour for what was the precursor to 30 for 30, which was, what was it? ESPN Original Entertainment, EOE. So we colorized the 58 Colts Giants NFL championship game. They call it the greatest game ever played. And I don't know if it was that, but it was the first, overtime game, in NFL history, or at least championship game. And we had former Colts and Giants watching it with current then Colts and Giants. And that worked out pretty well. We did 2 hours on that. You mentioned the SEC storied. We did one. I've done a couple doing and done. We did a LSU baseball dynasty show that premiered right after COVID hit in 2020. And then I have one airing in 2025 that I'm in production on now on South Carolina baseball and their ties to a couple kids with pediatric cancer. Which you talk about emotional interviews, and there's a lot of that going on that one.
Yeah. If people haven't had a chance to check out the ESPN 30 for 30 series, I think that's the pinnacle of sports documentaries. And they initially did it just as a one-off thing for the 30th anniversary of ESPN. It proved so successful they put out films under the 30 for 30 moniker every year now. And it's some of the most compelling, interesting, behind the scenes documentaries that just happen to all focus on sports, but oftentimes the athletic event is kind of the ancillary thing of like what Marc talked about, the greater issue. Like one of my favorites is the 1989 World Series, where the 1989 San Francisco earthquake hits during the pregame as they're about to start playing the World Series. And it's the reactions of what's happening both at the stadium as well as what's happening around the community as this city just gets leveled by this devastating earthquake. So there's a lot of them I think most of them are on Hulu, and there's some other streaming services that carry a few. Some of them, including the ones that Marc has worked on, I think are on ESPN Plus or on ESPN.com. So if you haven't had a chance to check out 30 for 30 films, but you love documentaries that cover historic aspects, and whether you're a passive sports fan or a big sports fan, or you don't care about sports at all, 30 for 30's I don't know of a single bad 30 for 30 that's been done. I highly, highly recommend it. It's high quality filmmaking.
Do you, Mark, do you have a favorite 30 for 30 that you've either done or haven't done? You know, do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? Very good question. I never really thought about it. There's one I like that just came out. I'm just here for the riot on
Oh, yeah.
the Vancouver riots right after they lost the Stanley Cup to the Bruins. That's one I just watched that I liked a lot. There's one, The Best That Never was Marcus Dupree from Mississippi State was a great one. The Miami stuff that Billy Corbin did, the two-parter on that is probably that I liked a lot. The USFL one was good. I know the Trump stuff in that got a lot of press on, but it was good beyond that. So
My probably all-time favorite, and what's great about these films is that they're themed on a sport, but again, they're not necessarily talking about the ins and outs of the sport. It's the human aspect behind it, or some of the greater issue. There's one they made about the 1983 NFL draft. It had multiple Hall of Famers in it, John Elway and Dan Marino, and it delves into all of the behind the scenes conversations that these teams are having when a draft takes place, and all of the conversations, the phone calls, the negotiations of, are you going to draft this guy? Should we trade for this or that? Or are they interested in this guy? And it's so compelling to see all of the behind the scenes trading that goes on in determining all of that. Also, David just mentioned in the chat, the Ric Flair one, the pro wrestling one. That one is so good.
Yep.
That one is fantastic.
I don't know if there was one that was weird that came out not too long ago, the American Gladiators one. If you get a chance to see that, that one was a little off for me just production wise, but it's an interesting story.
Well, and at the exact same time, Netflix was working on a totally separate documentary also about American Gladiators. So we had two films come out essentially at the exact same time on the same topic.
I had that happen with Pete Maravich and HBO. We were both doing shows on him at the same time.
And that is an anomaly that does happen in Hollywood more than people think, actually, where sometimes it's a fluke. You have no idea that the other production company is working on something and it just kind of comes out that way. Sometimes it's intentional, where there's a good script that's making the rounds at studios and there's a bidding war over the script. And so one studio pays more to acquire the rights to the story, and the spurned studio that was finished second place says, screw it, we're going to make our own version of it. And that's how we end up in the same year. Like there'll be Volcano and Dante's Peak come out. Two Volcano movies come out at the same time, or Deep Impact and Armageddon, two asteroid movies came out at the same time. And an Oregon Story, Prefontaine was a film that Tom Cruise produced, and he bought the rights to the story. And there was a second script called Without Limits that was shot in Eugene at the University of Oregon. And Prefontaine was shot in Tacoma, the University of Puget Sound, where my brother was going to school at the time, which was really trippy growing up in Eugene. You go to Tacoma and suddenly there's University of Oregon stuff everywhere on his campus. So the Prefontaine film came out and it bombed. It was terrible. And the Without Limits film was shot in Eugene. That's fantastic. It was kind of dead on arrival because no one wanted to go see the first Steve Prefontaine film. So the second one didn't do very well in theaters either. That happens from time to time in Hollywood, where there's a story that studios latch onto and they're both competing over the original script. And the second series is like, well, screw it. Give me a story that's basically the same thing. And we end up with two films that are very similar, covering the same topic. It happens more often than you would think. And DreamWorks was basically established on that, where there were some people who worked at Disney, high-end producers, that felt that they were scorned by Michael Eisner, and they said, screw it, we're going to start our own studio. And every time that Disney would come out with a film, DreamWorks would come out with something similar that would almost be like mocking Disney in a way. That's how, right after Finding Nemo, suddenly Shark Tale came out in DreamWorks. There'd be parallels of animated films, or DreamWorks would come out with their own version of what Pixar or Disney was doing as almost a giant FU to Disney from these ex-Disney employees.
Would that be kind of like, I think it was a few years back with the Fire Fest when Netflix dropped the documentary, and then I think the day right after Hulu dropped their Firefest documentary.
Yep. There were also two different Woodstock 99 documentaries that came out at
I
basically
remember that. It was
the same
HBO
time.
Max and it was Netflix.
And Netflix came out with one as well. Yeah, that sometimes that's intentional of its studios competing for the same story, and sometimes it's completely random, and no one realizes until it's too late to cancel a project that someone else is working on the story at the same time. I don't know what kind of came of that, Mark. Do you have any insider fun stories associated with that? Maybe it's funny now, but at the time you're going, "Oh crap!"
So we didn't pay people to do interviews, but HBO would occasionally. So they had signed Maravich's widow to a deal. So I couldn't, but they didn't sign her kids. Okay, couldn't or didn't or what? I don't know what. So I could interview the kids, or I could put the kids in the show. I had one of them. One just passed away, Josh, in the last week. One of them is at a dribbling montage in the start of the show, but I ended up finding Pete's brother, who HBO didn't find, by calling around bars in New Orleans. And hand to God, he picked up the phone at the third bar I called.
Well, and that gets into what you were talking about of what does a producer do? Problem solving. Yeah. You can't, you have this famous athlete, you're trying to do a documentary about this famous athlete. Obviously he's passed on at this point. So you're trying to talk to relatives. You're barred from talking to the wife. What do you do? Okay, let's go down the checklist of what are alternatives, what are possible potential solutions. So much of filmmaking, and David and others who have picked up a camera and tried to do this know, you come in with a plan and then at a certain point you throw that plan out the window and you're just like, how do we fix this? How do we still make it happen?
You lean into the content you have. I got a bunch of high school teammates, a bunch of LSU teammates, you shift away from the family side of the story as best you can. If you have, your Bach, it's a little different when you're doing an ESPN or a Big Ten show and you're doing an hour or a half hour versus where 30 for 30s are, or some of these more open-ended films where you could be 100 minutes or 85 minutes or something like that. There's the ones I was doing, I knew that, all right, what is the best hour I can do here? What is the best 52 minutes, I think it was, I can do here. So do that. That's same true with the Oregon show I'm doing now. What's the best 24-30 I can tell?
I had a very fun conversation a couple of years ago with James Ivory, who is from Klamath Falls and is an Academy Award winner, and considered the most successful independent filmmaker of all time. And he was telling me a story about shooting a film in India, and on the very first day, his lead actor got arrested and thrown in prison. And they're on a very strict shooting schedule. What do you do? It's like, okay, let's run through our schedule and find every scene where that actor is not in it and shoot all of those scenes now while we try to negotiate with police for our actor's release and work on the schedule. But the worst thing you can do is just panic or freak out. It's a matter of, okay, plans have changed. Suddenly this is happening. Let's calmly, rationally look at what are possible solutions and let's work towards figuring out an alternative. If you can do that when all hell's breaking loose and you can be calm and thoughtful and think through, here's a problem, what are some different things we can do? You can be a film producer. Because as Mark said, honestly, problem solving is the number one thing that film producers do. Anyone have any further questions for Mark here, or any thoughts I want to add to the conversation? Looks like Anthony
had one.
I do. I missed apparently. Why would you ban from speaking to the?
They had signed. She had signed an exclusive deal with HBO.
Okay.
I had lunch with her. Lovely woman. Just couldn't put her on camera.
Oh, okay. You couldn't afford.
Yeah. No, it was Blood Feud. I actually, I don't know if I would have a specific question, but it's very interesting to me because admittedly, I don't watch very many sports, but I am in fact kind of in the demographic exactly that Kurt talked about is I don't really watch sports too often, but I do watch a lot of like sports documentaries or related kind of content. I guess I have more things of just, I guess, the broad questions of what is it about the work that you do and in the world of entertainment that you're part of specifically that you think is most interesting? And also, I guess another question that I had was, out of all the different kinds of athletes that you worked with, is there ever a kind of like sport or athlete that you haven't had the chance to cover yet, but you want to?
Ooh, good one. Now, I can throw in my 2 cents, Mark, with your connections. I've always felt that the single greatest comeback in sports history, and I can't believe a film hasn't been made about it yet, is the America's Cup when USA was down 9-0 to New Zealand. New Zealand had a capsize issue in the Bay Area, and it was best of 21 races, and USA came back to win the entire series, never lost another race. It being down 9, and people talk about like that Boston, New York, you know, a divisional game as greatest comeback, but the greatest comeback, you know, the tagline for it for an ESPN 30 for 30 isn't, would you believe the greatest comeback in the history of sports didn't happen on a field or a gridiron or a stadium? It happened on the water.
Right. I had to log the America's Cup at 90, what year, 94, 95? The year that I remember having to, you know, sit there and, you know, we every sporting event we logged, if it was on, it was on. We were,
in fact, the only reason I know what you guys are talking about right now is because I learned about this comeback from like a documentary style sports YouTube video. So it's fun hearing about this as well.
It's a very obscure sport, but I'm diehard America's Cup fan because I grew up around sailboats. So it's the only reason why, but I watch every single GP America's race and every World Cup race. And I tell people all the time, the greatest comeback in sports history wasn't football, wasn't soccer, wasn't baseball. It was America's Cup yacht racing.
Nice. To answer, I'll throw a third thing in there. The show I wanted to do that I could never get off the ground was on Manute Bol. He was a basketball player out of Sudan. And
super tall, right?
What?
He's super tall. Manute Bol.
7'7".
Yeah.
He was the first of really the outrageously tall players. And he's been passed away for 10, 15 years now. But I had talked to him about doing the show. You know, it was a drum I beat. I wanted to go. I was trying to figure out how to get to Sudan and tell the whole story. And I just never could get anyone at ESPN. You know, I still can't believe they hadn't done, you know, like a real 30 for 30 on him, because there's nobody like him back then.
His son actually played at the University of Oregon very briefly.
Yeah, Bol, yeah, absolutely.
Bol, who's now in the NBA, his son, played 9 games at the University of Oregon before getting a season-ending injury and then went straight to the NBA.
Sure. I had lunch with him in West Hartford. I met him twice, but only once for the show. No, so that's the one that ticks me off, that I never got to do that show out of that. As for what sport, Australian was football. I grew up watching at 2:00 in the morning, you know, on ESPN. That always fascinated me.
Australian football is so it's fascinating.
Yeah,
I never once understood it, but I used to watch it in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, because there would be these guys in smoker jackets and hats that would do this like pointing thing whenever someone scored, and we just would always make fun of that pointing thing, and still do it amongst my buddies from time to time whenever someone scores in Australian rules. But I know what you're talking about. The other thing I used to watch all the time on ESPN that I haven't seen in years, and I brought it up to my buddies, when was the last time they showed one of the tractor pulls? Because they used to do that all the time, of those tractor pulling events on ESPN, like 2 a.m. You can't sleep, turn it on, and there's someone doing a full pull through a mud bog with like this giant like hot rod thing.
Right. Now they're showing cornhole and pickleball and whatnot. So
yeah, not to ask your Ocho bucket list, but
there's a couple of those Ocho things.
Yeah, that's just I ask because I've always been really like kind of endlessly fascinated by the variety of like sports and athletic related competitions that exist, and just the number of ways that, you know, we as humans, you know, can express competition in different activities and kind of, you know, like push ourselves and create those kinds of stories that are really worth remembering and documenting. Because like I know by athletically, I'm a wrestler. Or at least that's been my favorite sport. And I always know that it's just like, man, at least on the narrative side, I actually talked about it at the last member meeting about like a perceived like underrepresentation in narrative media about like grappling and wrestling and different things just in, like modern media. But it also makes me think about like in sports, there's so many really interesting sports and more specifically sports stories that are out there that are just like so crazy and so cool to learn about. But it's just always fun to hear, at least from you coming from this world specifically, of like where in your mind, what are those stories that you think really deserve to be heard more?
Before I get to that, we also do a short feature series, 4 to 8 minute features on collegiate wrestling in the Big Ten on the mat. So
I would not to say that wrestling is underrepresented really, because I
know, but we do one for each Big Ten school. And my business partner wrestled in high school. It's more his baby than mine. I pinch it because he can't do 14 of them. I'll do 3 or 4 that he can't. So, and just try to stay out of trouble on those basically, because he's more the wrestling head than I am. But no, but they're all cool stories. Well, underrepresented, we still don't hear as many women's stories as we probably should. That's probably where I'd go first. The
Caitlin
slant.
Clark has been interesting.
Yeah, I did a half hour with Caitlin for as part of the series that I'm doing this Oregon show. I did at Iowa one. 28 hours at Carver Hawkeye Arena. She had a game winner against Indiana. That was kind of the finish of that show. She was great. I mean, I didn't have a lot of time with her. I had about a half hour with her and we knocked it out, but she's professional. And, I was happy that I was able to interview her before it all got where it is now.
Right.
Well, and ridiculous.
In terms of the conversation about the ESPN 30 for 30 films too, ESPN also did a spinoff calling it 9 for 9.
9 for 9, yeah.
Which was a series of women's focused sports documentaries in reference to the anniversary of Title IX. And so there were a number of really compelling sports documentaries that were focusing on women's athletics that were done by ESPN. But I agree, there should be more.
I'm curious on the technical side of things. I know you don't shoot or edit really, but with how fast technology has changed over the last 20 years, has that really impacted your guys' business as far as being able to do things faster?
So this is a 4 terabyte drive. I honestly don't know how many hours of HD footage fits on a 4 terabyte drive. But I know how many hours of SD footage fit on a 30-minute tape when I shot tape through the 90s. That was a little bit less than 30 minutes.
When I was shooting news and sports, high school sports, I was carrying around 3/4 inch camera.
Yeah, I started shooting high 8 and 3/4. Those are the 2 things I started on. I've shot 3. So you were carrying,
Yeah, with the big recording deck with the umbilical cord and
right. Basically any of that it can air. That you can, when you're bumping around, when you're in motion, and that's, it's helped more than it's hurt, but it's not, data travels so much faster. I can download, because I have fiber optic cable in here. I can get, 200 to 300 gigs an hour downloaded. If I need, I very rarely need to do that, but broadcast quality games, a reel of that's, a couple hundred gigs. For the SEC store, the South Carolina baseball, I took a couple weeks and downloaded all the melts and games that were up online at ESPN. And And I couldn't do that before. I used to have to go and people would dub things and tapes would get sent back and forth. And, you know, you could check tapes out of the library at ESPN. And sometimes they'd even find their way back on the shelves and sometimes they wouldn't. And, you know,
It's such a different era with digital cameras. I was using physical film when I was in Hollywood, and David is chiming out. But David said that Karen, he's going to follow up with you. So he left his contact info in the chat. So make sure to copy that so you two can follow up. I'm really glad we were able to make that connection. Thank you, David, for joining. Appreciate it. Do you have any final
perfect.
words
Thank
you
you.
want to chime
I really appreciate getting to meet everybody. Awesome group.
loved it.
in?
Thank you,
thanks
David.
for being here, David.
Bye.
Just on my tangent about physical film, it's such a different perspective now from filmmakers where you no longer have in the back of your head concerns over capacity. Like there used to be a day when you were a photographer and you're out covering something. Karen, you might remember this, having to think, I only have 24 photos on this reel. Now I cover, I do a lot of concert photography. I may come home with 1,000 photos from the concert and then I just go through my software and trim it down to like the best 30 shots. I don't have to worry about that capacity issue that there once was. With physical film, it used to be like how much space is on your tape that you can film. Are you going to film the entire thing, or are you going to be selective when you press record? And then the editing process. Every year we get at least 1 or 2 films for our film festival that are submitted that were shot with actual film, and it gives it a unique look, certainly. But the first question I always ask in interviews is, why? Like, why did you put yourself through this hell when you didn't have to, that now that everything is digital? Karen, it looked like you wanted to say something. I'm sorry, I went on a tangent.
Oh, no. I was just thanking David. No, I'm listening to you.
You know, I remember the first time I shot HD. We did the first HD Sports Century was Pedro Martinez, and we went down. Spring training was for Red Sox pitcher, for those who don't. And we went to Fort Myers, Florida, and I hadn't seen HD in action yet. This is 2000. This is 2004, 5, somewhere in there. And I remember the Red Sox wear these bright red spring training uniforms. And they flipped up the monitor. And I'm like, oh, that's HD. I get it. Got it. This looks a little different than what we're used to.
Everything's so crisp all of a sudden.
We had to replace our news set when we made the switch to HD because it showed all the cracks and stuff in the back where they seemed pieces together and everything. It had to get a total reskin.
Yeah.
You know, even the notes process to when you go to network. I mean, when we did it in the early 2000s, we were still like, we'd stop down at the end of the day and output a cut onto VHS or onto beta. No, it must have been on the beta. Or even, and then transfer that to DVD in some cases, to send to an executive, to somebody at ESPN so they could look at it and
just
do notes. And just that whole process of, sending a cut and, days would go by, you'd have to allow for all that time. And now, I put out a cut today on, and it was on Vimeo 2 minutes after, we stopped. So.
Well, we've got about 15 minutes left, so we're kind of winding down, but thank you everyone for being a part of this conversation so much. And thank you, Marc, for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. We try to keep these very informal, as you can tell, but kind of fun and engaging and interesting conversations. So as we kind of run down at the end of these meetings, I always try to make sure everyone gets a final chance to chime in with either a last question or just a final comment. So we'll just kind of go around and see if anyone has something for Marc that they want to say. Why don't we start with the folks online? So Karen, do you have a final question or comment you want to throw out?
Yeah, I was wondering, you talked about the difficulties you had tracking down who you wanted to interview in the opening here. Have you ever had one go just like clockwork?
Oh, I mean, the clockwork ones aren't interesting. you know, I mean, the LSU show, I got probably 90, the LSU baseball show, I probably did 80 some interviews for that. And I probably batted about, you know, there were probably 2 people who didn't want to do it and worked around them. So, but I can't get that, you know, if 80 people do it and 2 don't, I'm not really that, you know, I'll live. You know, the clockwork ones are a pleasure. Iowa went like clockwork. You know, you call up the school. I said, I need these people. I found, you know, there were 5, 6 people in that one. They all said yes. I knocked it out in 3 days, and that was that. So yeah, occasionally it goes right. You know, you knock on wood, and you know, but they don't.
No, that's nice though, because I know that gives people hope that there are those circumstances that do exist.
Some of it's luck, some of it's just if you're working with people who are, you know, in Iowa's case, the sports information staff is great, and you know, the people who were not affiliated with the school were friendly and pretty accessible. So all those things factored in and you know, made it work.
To piggyback on that real quick, Mark, do you have, and you don't have to name names if you don't want to, but your biggest nightmare or biggest difficulty you've ever had to problem solve that you eventually got to work?
Well, I got thrown out of Jim Brown's house. So Jim had just gotten arrested. This was 1999. We'd already done like 3 interviews with him for his Sports Century thing. And he didn't want to get asked about his arrest. And so I had the brunt of that. And I'm sitting there thinking, because I knew where we were in the countdown at that point, because we'd started in January or so, you know, counting down from 50. And I knew where we were in the countdown in, you know, October. And I'm thinking, wow, no worse than the 5th greatest athlete of the century. It's just killing me right now. So, but you know, eventually, you know, we got what we need. You know, he didn't end up talking about the arrest, but he had a press conference that we ended up using, you know, in the back end of the show, and it was fine. Everybody was fine.
If you spend any time in the industry at all, especially for you that are just kind of getting started, just know if you're in it long enough, everyone has that one go-to story of the absolute hell that they went through on something. It's inevitable. Zaro, do you have any last question or final comment you want to throw out there?
No, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the work that you do on 30 for 30s. I'm a sports fan, so I always, anytime there's like a huge game, football wise or what have you, someone makes a comment like, "Oh, there should be a 30 for 30 about, you know, the kick six with Alabama and Auburn,"
Right.
or some type of thing. So it's really cool to actually listen to someone and talk with someone that was a part of those. So, you know, for the sports fans out there, I want to thank you for all the 30 for 30s that you've worked
Sure.
on and all of that, you know, just talking for them. So thank you so much. I really appreciated this.
Sure. And soon you'll have the Big Ten Network out there, you know, for UO stuff at least. So,
I'm hyped. I'm so excited. Thank you.
sure.
Since I'm significantly older than you, Zaro, I have very mixed feelings because I grew up a Pac-12 kid. Well,
Same, yeah.
Pac-10 kid. That's how far I go back.
We should go back to Pac-8.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I spent a lot of time at Autzen in the 80s when there was maybe 10,000 people there and a 3-win season was cause for celebration. Now, if the team loses 1 game, it's fire the coach. So very different times these days, but it's fun to kind of know where things go. And Mark, I'm sure you know, Syracuse and Penn State, you two had
Yeah.
your ups and downs through the years as well. So sure, lots of memories on that same parallel.
Absolutely.
Like the great times when Donovan McNabb was there, and then the post times when Donovan McNabb was not there.
Not there, yeah. I was a little bit before Donovan when I was there, but I went to the Orange Bowl when he played in it, and you know, great era. So
Yeah. It looks like we lost Orion, but I appreciate her coming out. Is Trish still there? Trish, do you want to chime in at all?
Bye, everyone, by the way. Thank you so much. I have to head out.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for being a part of this, Zaro. We do this every single month, and we'll have different guests on, so you're welcome to join anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like Trish and Orion both left, but I appreciate them being here. So let's go around the table. Jared, do you have anything that you want to chime in with as we wrap up?
First, I'd just like to thank you for taking your time to be here with us and answer some questions. Was this always the dream, sports documentaries, or was this just something you kind of fell into along?
No, I fell into this. So when I started at Syracuse, I thought I was going to be a broadcaster. And the first person to air check one of my tapes when I was starting at the radio station was Ian Eagle, who has had a wonderful career for, CBS. And I heard him and I heard me, and I was like, I don't sound like that. So that's how it's supposed to sound. I don't sound like that. So I knew I wasn't going to have that kind of career. The question is, what kind of career I have? And I ended up feeling like I was not bad at doing the producing and behind the scenes stuff. Even though I got my start doing radio with that, even before TV, I worked reel to reel, catching stuff with tape, in razor blades, I'm that old, carting stuff up. But and then even at ESPN, I didn't feel like I was progressing through doing studio stuff, which would lead to line producing Sports Center. And I didn't want to do that. That seemed dreadfully boring. And there's a lot of it where working Sports Center or working a daily paper or daily anything is like working at a mill. And I wanted to find a way out of the mill, basically, and Sports Century kind of lent itself to that. And I said, I'll give that a shot. And not everyone jumped at it because they didn't know what their future would be when they got back, but risk reward kind of deal there. And that was 26 years ago, 27 now, that I made that decision. So here I am.
Been doing it about the same amount of time. I started in '97 in broadcast TV. So yeah.
Great. Looks like Anthony would be next. Anthony, you want to chime in on anything?
Yes, Mark, we go to the section real quick on, we pay the athletes.
Yeah, Anthony, you're gonna have to get closer to the mic. We can't really hear you.
I apologize. Mark, the athletes, were they paid to interview, or did you have to pay them? Or
No, I've actually never, I'll say rarely, have rarely paid an interview. I haven't for Big Ten, haven't for ESPN. I feel like I did somewhere along the line for something.
So
But a lot of times, though, we've paid for footage and stuff.
I see.
So that happens on occasion, but not for an interview specifically.
So the athlete wants to be on.
Right. I always say we don't carry firearms to make people do interviews. Be here because you want to be here.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing to keep in mind. Karen and I have dealt with this as newspaper journalists of sometimes you have an assignment of an article you need to write, but people really don't want to talk to you about what the topic is, so how do you coerce them into still being able to have a conversation? Sometimes you're more successful than not in it, but it's you don't hit every single time, right, Karen? She's giving the big thumbs up sign on.
Sounds like these.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then there are those that approach you that you're not even really sure if you should be talking to them about a specific thing too. So the reverse is definitely true.
Yeah. There is an art to doing a good interview, and it's something that comes with experience. Some people are naturally good at it, but it's usually just doing so many interviews over time. You just kind of learn how to be able to carry an interesting conversation. And Karen's giving the thumbs up on that as well. Did you any follow up on that, Anthony, or did that answer your question?
Oh, yes, I was just curious, basically from the athletes, were they kind of basically greedy about this, or were they wanting to start? So yes.
There are athletes who have asked to get paid that we have not done.
I see.
That happened a bunch in Sports Century. That there were people who wanted to get paid. I remember Jake LaMotta. This is secondhand. I don't think he got paid, but they took him out to dinner and he ran up like $1,000 bill at Spot's Steakhouse.
Oh my gosh. Big years.
Probably
Well, I don't think it was the food.
The drinks.
yeah, it's the drinks to get it out.
Yeah.
John, do you have final thoughts or question you want to throw out?
Well, you know, when we're talking about the interviewing process, I remember one time I interviewed a guy that I've always been interested in a few different subjects, and one of them was rife machines and dark field microscopy. And I ran into somebody who actually had built one, a dark field microscope. He knew a lot about rife stuff, so I wanted to interview him. And so I had the opportunity to do so, but I went back and listened to, you know, the recording, and I just realized what an absolute idiot I was as an interviewer. You know, saying things, like sometimes you interject, like, you're trying to say, well, I know that, I wanted to, and then you try to share something. I'm like, oh my gosh, shut up, you idiot. So yeah, it just reminds me of times I've gone to Toastmasters or other things like that, where you get to kind of listen to yourself and get reviewed. I would definitely say always go back and listen to your interviews. Make sure you hone your craft so you don't make a fool out of yourself. So anyways, so I get a greater appreciation for people who have been able to do it. So, Mark, I think I feel for you too sometimes, like you're saying, sometimes you listen to yourself and you're like, maybe I should be behind the scenes instead of out here, and I think that's why everybody eventually kind of finds their niche, because we can't all be in the forward light. There's only so much room out there. But I really don't know what to ask. I mean, it's nice to listen to your experiences, and I'm sure I got a gazillion questions, but I've just been so busy with school and teaching and doing IT work at local high school, and it's just consumed me.
If you think of them later, by all means, you can pass them along the curtain.
I mean, I'm sure I will, because for me, it's like, how do you find, like, it's like location scouting, like some of these people, I mean, there's just some of the other things. And I think of like the movie Dune in the '84. It's like, how did they do all the logistics for the production of that? Poor, David Lynch, everybody bags on him or something, but I thought he did a great job. But, he was, it's the De Laurentiis or whatever, Raphael, I forget who all it was, but, I'm just like, I just wonder, how did those people deal with the logistics? And like I say, watching The Offer series just kind of gave me a really good dose of like, because you think, oh, they all got it planned, and all just going like clockwork, and it's like anything but, So I'm just, I like the question. It's like, just how often, what's the percentage of when it is clockwork? I think you'd be lucky to hit 50%, or even, I wonder.
It's not so much clockwork as to when are the problems manageable. I would say that, how much clockwork do you don't need if you've set it up well enough, you don't necessarily need things to be clockwork if the problems are manageable enough. And that happens more, that's, I don't know, 50 to 60% of the time that, it's, where I've got it where I'm not pulling my hair out. So
there's a thought, and Mark's coming from the East Coast side. I come from the Hollywood side of things. I can speak to in LA. Oftentimes it is a minor miracle when a film actually gets released, because there's about 100 things that can go right in the course of a film production and about 1 million things that can go wrong.
Sure.
And even when the film is done, and even if the film is fantastic, sometimes the studio puts it on a shelf and never actually releases it, or it's not until years later it gets released. Right now, Warner Brothers is getting a lot of pushback because they made, for all accounts, a really fantastic film called Coyote v. Acme. And they realize that they can make more money by not releasing the film and taking a tax credit for that than actually putting it in theaters when there's this giant outcry of people who want to see the movie.
Nice,
So it's a minor miracle to finish a film, and then it's a further miracle if it actually gets an audience.
Sure.
Yeah, that's kind of dirty. That's that kind of scenario. Things don't come out. Wow.
Well, and what's happening in the wake of it, because some of the people who were involved in that film, Coyote v. Acme, made it very public, the fact that they're very proud of this film and they think it should be released. And in the articles that were covering that, it came out, here's all the other films that they've shot that they decided not to release because they got more money from a tax credit than by actually putting the film out. So there's some full on like Batman and Batgirl films that are fully 100% finished that will never see the light of the day because Warner Brothers made more money by putting it on a shelf than putting it in theaters.
How can they get a tax credit if it never gets released? That's ridiculous.
Ask the IRS. I don't know. A lobbyist is probably the answer to that question.
Nice, right on.
That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common. I mean, going back, I guess it's probably been about 20 years, but Uwe Boll was shooting all of his movies in Germany because it didn't matter. He was getting massive tax credits and was making money on that side of it. Didn't matter if the movie was good, if it ever did anything in the theaters.
Yeah, very, very true. If one of the weird oddities when you work in TV and film production of all the behind the scenes stuff that Mark probably has many more stories. We've run out of time for him to share, but some odd things. Bowen, you're last up. If you have a final question or comment.
Yeah, I don't have any real like major questions or nothing too grand, but I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. It's been really informative listening to you and just kind of learning more about this part of filmmaking, which is definitely something that like I haven't had the chance really or like at all to learn very much about the world of like sports media, documentaries, everything regarding that. So it's been very informative learning from you and just coming from another like I've been in this realm of just a like kind of a not closed off realm of filmmaking, but just being an actor and, you know, usually means that you stick to like narrative stuff, fiction, or at least things that like, you know, don't necessarily butt up very much with, you know, real world productions. But hearing more from that you has been very informative. So thank you.
Welcome.
And with that, Mark, the floor is going to be yours for any final advice or anything that you want to share before we call it night. And again, thank you so much for being here. I'll let you think about that for a second because I want to reiterate, we are looking for extras for the feature film shooting in Ashland right now, if anyone is involved in that. We have a production crew coming to Klamath next week to do some commercial work. We are actively looking for cast and crew to be in a feature film shooting in Medford next month.
SAG-AFTRA.
Yep, and that is a SAG-AFTRA production. So if you're gonna act in it, you do need to be union. Though extras, there might be an exception on that if you want to be background. And there's also the Oregon Humanities video producer. They're currently asking for requests for proposals. So if you're interested in that, Google it real quickly, or I did throw it into the chat. And with that, Mark, thank you so much for being here. And if you have any advice or wise words or funny story you want to share.
I'll tell my favorite funny story, which mercifully did not happen to me. So General William Westmoreland from the Vietnam War era was interviewed for I think it was probably for the Muhammad Ali show back then. And the producer for that, which I will say again, was not me, was told, go ahead and fly down to Charleston and go interview him. So he got all the info and landed in Charleston. And it was then he realized that he had flown to Charleston, South Carolina, and William Westmoreland was in Charleston, West Virginia. So know where you're going. That would be my advice.
And be ready to pivot if you have to suddenly change a flight from Grand Rapids, Michigan to Phoenix to LA to Tacoma to wherever. Mark, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully this was enjoyable for you as it was for us, getting to hear about your stories. And we look forward to all of the projects you've worked. I'm sure some folks are going to go research some of the things you've worked on now, but also the upcoming stuff that you have with Big Ten Network. Anything you want to plug?
August 2 is the big moment on the Oregon Triple Crown. So that'll air. Don't have a time yet. I know it'll be in a block probably in the evening, but I'll tell Kurt when it does. If you do not have the Big Ten Network, call your local cable operator or satellite provider.
Mark, thank you so much. I know it's very late being out on the East Coast. Enjoy your kids' graduation tomorrow. And thank you so much for joining us. For those of you still on the call, keep in mind next couple months, we will be doing this on second Thursdays, not third Thursday, because of the third Thursday events downtown. So we'll see you on Thursday, July 11th for our next Klamath Film meeting. Featured guest TBD. Thank you everyone for joining. Greatly appreciate you being here.
You guys.
Take care,
Also-
guys.
Oh, sorry.
Good luck.
You need something? Okay. Kurt, quick question.
Yeah.
Since you're the host, are you the one that's holding on to the recording?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I don't need to download it on my end?
Nope.
Okay.